AMSC for a while. I started in August of 2019, and so I'm coming up on a year there. But my primary field is digital. I teach in our digital media department at the school, and a lot of people don't know we have that department, but we do. We have digital media and entertainment design, and I'm helping right now to revamp that department and what that means for our students, because that's what's most important. I'm a filmmaker, and I write and direct films. I've written and directed a feature film, Blood First. You can't get more hood than it. I won't even lie. It's straight hood. It's hood, it's urban drama, but people like it, they enjoy it, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have had the opportunity to write and direct that and to co-produce it. I'm currently in the process of finishing up a documentary called American Africans. It's been a labor of love. And so American Africans is a documentary that I've been working on for about 10 years. It is chronicling African Americans in the United States reclaiming African spirituality as their own. And the reason why I chose this subject, and I kept trying to give it to friends who were journalists and, they're professional writers. I was like, girl, you need to write about this. And they were like, girl, you need to make a documentary about this. Why do you keep trying to give us this idea? And it's really because, you have, like most of us, we have a million things going on in our lives. And the reason why my friends, of course, were saying you need to do this is because, my perspective is different from theirs. I was raised in a traditional African religion. So I didn't convert, and there's nothing against conversion or anything like that, but my experience is different because I was raised by two parents who in the 1970s chose to practice this religion. So what religion is this, you may ask yourself? So some people call it Ifa, I-F-A, or if they're from Cuba, they might call it Lucumi, Lucumi, or you might see it spelled Lukumi. In Brazil, they call it Candomblé, Candomble. Okay. If you go to Trinidad, they might call it Shango Baptist. Okay. Or Shouters Church, right? Shango Baptist. And the reason why I'm mentioning these particular Ifa, Lucumi, Candomblé, and Shango Baptist is because these particular walks of faith or spiritual religious belief systems stem back to the Yoruba people of Nigeria, West Africa. The Yoruba people that's like one of the largest, if not the largest ethnic group in Nigeria are the Yoruba. Okay. They're, if not one of the largest, they're definitely the largest. Okay. And so these belief systems are all based on the traditional Yoruba belief systems, right? Now, these belief systems have survived in various places to a lesser or greater degree, depending on the number of people of Yoruba descent that were in those places. So let's take as an example, Lucumi in Cuba, right? The term Lucumi, Oluku, comes from the Yoruba word Olokumi, which means circle of friends, okay? And they call the religion there Lucumi, all right? Now, because we had a lot of people who were transported during the transatlantic slave trade to Cuba, right? Those people were people who were from Yoruba, from the Yoruba ethnic group. And understand this, when we say Yoruba ethnic group, it's like having a large family. You know how you have a family and you be like, they're the Berries, but the Berries are part of the Jacksons. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And the Jacksons are part of the Simmonses, right? So we have the Simmons, we got the Berries, we got the Jacksons, but we're all part of one family, right? Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the Yoruba, we're talking about it from that point of view. There were people who were of the Yoruba ethnic group or tribe, if you will, who lived in Benin. Okay. Remember, all of the borders in Africa are artificial and made up by Europeans who colonized Africa. So they literally, you had ethnic groups that were like the Yoruba, we live in Southwest Nigeria, let's say, and we live in Benin, which used to be called Dahomey. Well, they came down and they just drew a border and they didn't ask the people, hey, should we include this part? No, they just did what they wanted to do arbitrarily to fit their needs. So you had people who were being transported from what used to be called Dahomey, which is now called Benin. They were from the Yoruba ethnic group. There were people who were from Nigeria who were from the Yoruba ethnic group, and they were transported. You had people who were transported from everywhere. So this book that I helped edit, I was an editor on this book called Black Dance in Louisiana. She does a phenomenal job of breaking down which ethnic groups went where in the United States in particular. So we had a lot of people from what is called the Congo area come here to the United States. And we had a lot of people who were from like Nigeria, Benin, South, Western Africa as well come here, right? And not only did that boat stop in the United States, it stopped in Cuba, okay? It stopped in Brazil. It stopped in Trinidad. So wherever the Yoruba people went in particular, or these other African ethnic groups, because understand, there were multiple African ethnic groups that were transported here. And when I say here, I mean the Americas, North and South America, Central America, Caribbean. There were multiple ethnic groups that were transported and brought here, okay, against their will. We didn't just lay down our religion, our faith when we got on that boat, or even when we got to that plantation. Imagine going through the most traumatic time of your life that you couldn't even comprehend that you would ever in your lifetime be experiencing this. Why would you then lay down your faith or your God at that moment? Right? You wouldn't do that. You would, if we think about who we are today, we lean more into that faith. Okay? So we came with our own belief systems. We came with our own social mores and cultural norms. We came with our own languages. We came with our own hairstyles. We had different ways of literally showing people and telling people who we were. So one of the things the Yoruba in particular did was they had markings on their face. And it let people know, I'm a Yoruba, but I'm a Yoruba from this clan, this group over here. So you had scarification, like people would have like 3 little lines right here, or you might have a person that might have a line here and a line here. Every now and again, when I'm out and about in Atlanta, I'll see someone with a scar, and I was like, I know you're a Yoruba, right? And they're going, how do you know that? I'm like, child, you don't know. You don't know. Okay. I be knowing. Okay. Professor Young be knowing. I pay attention though, right? So when we were brought here, enslaved to the Americas, we still had our faith, we had our traditions, we had our cultural norms. Now, here's what happened. In places like Brazil and in places even like Cuba, and I'm even going to throw in places like Haiti. Haiti has its own traditions with traditional African beliefs. But people say now, like they have been practicing their belief system unbroken since even being here in the United States. I mean, since being in the New World, in the Americas. So you can go to Cuba, you can find a person who is a priestess of Oshun, and there might be slight differences. And I'll talk about these different things a little bit more in depth in a moment. But you can trace that and their lineage all the way back to Nigeria. Wow. All the way back. You can go to Brazil and you can meet a person who's also a priestess of Oshun. And they spell it differently, Oxum, because of Portuguese, right? And you can trace that back all the way back to Nigeria, to the Yoruba people. Wow. There was a lot more cultural and spiritual retention on the surface in these areas like Cuba, Brazil, Haiti, and Trinidad, primarily because we outnumbered Europeans. in those areas. So yes, while there was a forced conversion for many of us to Christianity, what we learned to do was we're going to practice our own religion over here and we're going to hide it behind your Catholic saints. Hallelujah. And so when you come into someone's house and you see a figure of, and in these areas, we're talking about Cuba, we're talking about Brazil in particular, even Haiti and Puerto Rico. I'm going to add Puerto Rico in there as well. The Europeans who colonized these areas were Catholic, primarily Catholic. So the Black people, African enslaved people that were there, hid their gods and their deities behind Catholic saints. This is why you can go to Cuba right now and you can see a figure for Saint Barbara. And Saint Barbara represented Shango, who was a Yoruba king, who is a deity that is worshipped. Okay. Now, I hope that wasn't too confusing for you all. Okay. So just understand that during the transatlantic slave trade, we brought our own gods, our own religion, spirituality, cultural norms, all of those things with us. And in places like Cuba, Brazil, Trinidad, you will see people who either will practice both Catholicism and their traditional belief system, because for them, they don't have to choose. The choosing is the European part. They're like, it's African. If it's all good and it's all positive, the idea is that I'll do both. You'll also see people who they only do the traditional part. Now, understand this, that when you get to the New World, right? You're talking about transatlantic slave trade. They didn't just take people from one African ethnic group. They took Yoruba people, they took Akan people from Ghana, they took Ewe people, they took Igbo people, right? And they put them on these plantations together. We didn't necessarily speak a common language. We didn't even necessarily have the same name for God. Mm-hmm. We didn't have the same deities, right? So now you have to ask yourself, well, how did these things survive, and why did this one survive more than this one, right? So there are a lot of fancy answers for that, but simply put, where you have people who have more of, I would say, a memory or more of an attachment to the traditions, the rituals, the ceremonies, then you would have more of a dominance, I would say, right? So, and we had a lot of what they call creolization. And when people think of creolization, they have a tendency of thinking of Black people intermarrying with white people, but that's not really what creolization is. Creolization would be the new generation of people being born in the Americas, in the New World, right? And we would marry people who were still Black and African, but they were from different ethnic groups, right? So we take on a little bit of what those belief systems and customs were as well. Okay. So I'm saying that to say is you do get some creolization, some mixing of spiritual belief systems here in the New World. So when we practice Ifa, or the traditional belief system here in the New World, specifically, let's say Cuba, okay, and they call it Lukumi, but they also, it's been noted, incorporate things that you'll just be like, you'll hear something where they'll say that's Arara. Arara is an ethnic group that comes from Benin. But when they were all living together on plantations and stuff, they took a little bit from that too, right? They took a little bit from this ethnic group over here too. So while the whole or the body of the practice looks very similar to what the traditional Yoruba people would practice in Nigeria, there are some slight differences. Okay, we have been separated for 400 years. That should be expected. Nowadays, because of the internet, because of travel, because we can afford to go back and forth. Now you do have more of people who are doing what they call traditional Ifa, right? Straight from Nigeria. And you have people who are practicing it, a derivation, if you will, that comes from Cuba, Lukumi. You have people who they practice the derivation that comes from Trinidad, Shango Baptist. And they have people who practice candomblé, which is practiced in Brazil. Now, remember, we've been colonized, so our language, our pronunciation is also slightly different as well, because in Cuba, they say things with a Cuban Spanish accent. So they say Ochun, they say Yemaya, they say this, they say that. And it's because of you know what I'm saying? It's because they speak Spanish there. But if I go to Brazil, they speak Portuguese. So they're gonna spell it differently, and they may say it slightly differently as well. But it's really not that much different from the original that was practiced in Nigeria by the Yoruba people. Okay. Now, how did my family come to practice this? Because I'm gonna let y'all in on a little secret. Everybody thinks I'm from Africa. They either think I'm from Africa or whatever island they are from, right? And I even get it from the Cubans, because when they see me and they see these beads around my neck, which I will explain in a moment, they like, oye, negrita. You know what I'm saying? Oye, hey, esta es mi hermana. And I'm like, well, not really, technically. Okay. I am from Cleveland, Ohio. I was born and bred in Cleveland, Ohio, y'all. And I grew up in Pittsburgh, PA. My mom is from Cleveland. No, my mom is from Pittsburgh. My dad's from Cleveland. They settled in Cleveland, Ohio, and they had my brothers and I. So how did my family come to do this thing? Well, my parents were revolutionaries. They were Pan-Africanists. So I was born in 1973, proud of it. Okay. And my parents were like, you know what? We do not believe in, we don't want our children raised with European iconography as God. That's number one. So no European pictures of Europeans being God or associated or being God-like. Okay. So that's one. Number two, my parents this is long before the DNA genealogy type thing. My parents began tracing our family history.
Wow.
In the 1970s, in the early 1970s. And my parents wanted to reflect that. And they had the full support of their families. They questioned it a little bit at first, but my father's family wasn't particularly religious, but if they had to say something, they would say they were Christian, probably Baptist or Pentecostal, but they weren't particularly religious. My mom's family, however, was Catholic, and she went to Catholic school. My grandmother taught at a Catholic school, all of those things. But my family, especially on my mom's side, had always been Pan-African, or very much what old people used to call race folks. So they were always about the progressiveness and the progression of Black people and the furtherment and advancement of Black people. So my great grandmother on my mom's side used to paint white baby dolls brown before she gave them to Black children.
Wow.
So my mother got it honestly, you know what I'm saying? And then my grandmother, she taught for the Catholic Diocese of Pittsburgh. And it was around the time that people started wearing afros, and the nuns used to tell Black children, especially Black girls, you can't come to school with your hair like that, all ratted up. You can't come like that. So my grandmother didn't say a word. She just came to school the next day with an afro, and dared somebody to send her home because she was a professional teacher there, right? So that's the kind of family my mother came from. And my mother was already a revolutionary. You know what I'm saying? Like, she was at community college in Cleveland, Ohio, and they had staged like a lock-in, a sit-in, you know what I'm saying, on the campus for Black studies and all of those things like that. That's what she was about. And her and my father kind of met within that circle. They had mutual friends, and she actually knew some of his family members first. And then they met. And it was like, oh, okay, like mines, right? He just got back from Vietnam.
Wow.
So he had been, reading autobiography of Malcolm X. He like met all kinds of people because he traveled the world with the Navy. And then he would, be in New York and all. He would go see Kwame Ture and all of these people speak and meet a lot of these people. So when they met each other, of course, they fall in love and everything. And they decided we're going to give our children, we want to give them a different foundation than what we had. And so my mother changed her name in the 70s to Yetunde. Yetunde is a Yoruba name that means mother returns, right?
Wow.
And my grandmother, her mother helped select that name
Wow.
because my grandmother at the time was in graduate school at the University of Pittsburgh getting her master's in education. And she completely supported it. And like I said, my grandmother, she's probably one of the smartest women I've ever met in my life. She was an international samovar, so she used to host a lot of international students, particularly from Africa,
Wow.
in her home. And she was always supportive of, you know, uh, Black, like I said, Black studies, African studies, Pan-Africanism. That is what my mom's side of the family was about. So when my mother said she wanted to change her name to this, my grandmother gave her approval. Oh, okay, yay, Tunde. You know what I'm saying? So they would call her Kat, short for Kathleen, within the family. But when they introduced my mom to anyone, this is my daughter, Yay Tunde.
Wow.
And my aunts and uncles, her younger brothers and sisters, Yay Tunde. And so in Cleveland and Pittsburgh, that's what my mom is known as. As a matter of fact, that is what my mom is known as my entire life. My dad, on the other hand, he there was a young man, at the time he was a young man. His name was Baba Osejiman Adefumi the First. And he used to have a temple in New York called the Temple of Dambalawedo. And this was in the 1959. He started
Wow.
this temple. And what they used to do is during this time, this is before it got popular, they were into Pan-Africanism. So they would be like offer classes on traditional African religions, have people come and speak. This was in New York. They would have people come and speak. They would do performances. He was a drummer and a dancer. So they
Wow.
had their own African dance company and everything. And then he went to Cuba. I believe he and Chris Oliano were the first African Americans to go to Cuba to become initiated as priests in the Lukumi version of the traditional Yoruba religion.
Hmm.
Okay. So they were the first African Americans to go to Cuba and become initiated in this African religion. At that time, it was easier to go to Cuba than to go to Nigeria and
Mm-hmm.
get this done. And plus, he had been around Afro-Cubans in New York, Black Cubans, who were practicing this religion as well. So he and Chris Oliano went and got initiated to these African deities called Orishas. Okay. So in traditional Yoruba theology, there is a supreme God called Olodumare, or we might say Eledumare or Olorun. And basically what that means is the owner of heaven and earth. Okay. So we have a supreme God, right? And we think of the Orishas, or these lesser deities, if you will, as the hands of God, God's will. They're there to carry out God's will. So if you're familiar with Catholicism, right, you know how you might lose something in your house. And if you're Catholic, they'll tell you, pray to St. Anthony that it
Mm-hmm.
gets returned back to you, right? Well, in the Yoruba tradition, we might say you need to pray to this Orisha, this
Mm-hmm.
deity. And there are over 500 Orishas. Now, in the New World and in Nigeria, everybody doesn't worship every. There are clearly ones that are more popular, right? So when Baba Adefumi the First and Chris Oliano went to Cuba to get initiated, they were initiated to each one to their own Orisha, and they became priests of that Orisha. What does that mean, right? What does that mean? It is very much like being inducted into the clergy for Christianity or becoming an imam in Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there is a ceremony, there is a ritual. People have to be there to witness your ceremony and ritual. Most of them leave with a notebook which of their divination. So during that, it's a lot of stuff that happens. And I myself, I'm not a priestess, but I'm a practitioner. So there's some things I couldn't possibly discuss with you because I'm not a priestess, right? I haven't been initiated to a certain deity. However, I know which deity has spoken for me, if you will, through divination. So what is divination? Divination is like when some of you all go and get a tarot card reading, right? Or you might have an old person in your family might read them tea leaves in the bottom of the cup. Or you know how Big Mama used to do? They had an old family Bible, and you telling her, Big Mama, I don't know this, and she do one of these numbers and put her finger in that Bible and say Psalm 27.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you need to say. Say it for 3 days
Mm-hmm.
after so and so. Or she might read the passage her finger lands on in that Bible, right? Now, divination takes it a step further. If the person is initiated as a priest or a priestess to a particular deity, you might go to them because you need a reading. A divination ain't nothing but a reading, okay? And what that means is I got questions. Can you help me find the answer?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this person in our tradition, in the Yoruba tradition, we think this person, they have been consecrated to this deity, right? So that deity is helping them to read you, to do the divination. Now, there are different ways to do divination. Just like some people use tarot cards are not a part of any traditional African religion that I know of. So whenever you see somebody telling you some African deity spoke to them through the tarot card, I'm here to tell you, no, ma'am, no, ma'am, no, sir, no, sir. Now, what you may see, and I want you all to know that each traditional African religion in Africa, or even practice here in the New World, every system has their own way to divine and to come up with answers. Sometimes it's cowrie shells, sometimes it's cola nuts, sometimes it's what's called ikin, um, uh, cola nuts, cowrie shells, coconut. Okay, even coconut divided into 4. Okay, and depending on the way when you ask the question, they might have you hold it and ask your question as you hold their implements, and then they'll take it back from you, and then they may throw it on the floor, or
Right.
throw however they do it, however this particular system does it, and then they'll interpret it. Their job is to interpret it. Now, is everyone a gifted reader? Well, hell, excuse my language. In your real life, everybody's not a gifted everything.
No.
We all know that there's some people who should not be on the pulpit right now.
Yes, right.
Okay. So I always tell people proceed with caution, use your first mind and common sense.
Yeah.
But I want you to also understand that it's not fly by night. People actually study with their godparents. In our tradition, in the Yoruba tradition in particular, lineage is very, very important. So I can quote and say Chris Oliano and Baba Adefumi the first. Like I can tell you who was the first because they are a part of my lineage. And Baba Adefumi actually gave my father his Yoruba name, which is Ibiyinka. And the rest of my family, they call my father EB for the rest of his life, short for Ibiyinka. To the point where he had nephews and cousins who swore, they were like, well, what's your daddy's real name? It's something with an E. They thought it was my father's initials, EB, but it was really his shortened for his Yoruba name, Ibiyinka, which my father started going by that in the 1970s. Okay. Now, Baba Adefumi the first is important to African Americans who practice the Yoruba religion, whether it be Lukumi, traditional Ifa, or what have you, because he really became the ambassador for the religion. Okay. He became an outspoken advocate. He was already a Pan-Africanist that was outspoken. And they started having a parade every year in New York. like an African Day parade. He started that. He and a bunch of other people, I should say, because I don't want to discount the contribution of many others, but he became the face of the movement. And in the 1970s, a little after I was born, he and some other people from New York left New York, bought land in Beaufort, South Carolina, actually Shelton, South Carolina, and started the African village Oyotunji. And when you visit there, it says now leaving the United States.
Wow.
Okay. And so they started, 1 second, give me 1 second.
Everybody, you can start getting your questions together as well. If you have any questions for Professor
Give me
Young.
1 second.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Professor Young's going to step away. So you can start getting your questions together for Professor Young. This is so good. This is so meaty. If you have any questions and if you don't want to speak verbally, you can put them in the chat. And when she comes back, if you want to speak verbally, that's fine. You can just open your microphone when we designate that time. This is really good stuff because as we've been studying Professor Young from chapter 1 all the way up to, I think we're kind of on chapter 7 now. This is the class's Introduction to Religious Studies, and we talked about different ways to experience a religion, or to study a religion, should I say. Sociological, we might look at anthropological, and so this is really a good way for us to experience and to learn about a different religion, other than picking up a book. You know, books are great. I have no problems with books. I love books. I got a whole bunch in the back. But to actually hear from someone who has been in it. This is not the book, and this is not the YouTube video. I do want to add, because we're going to go to a question and answer period, and I know you had something else right there, and I want you to get your other part on there. So you go ahead and continue, and our students are going to have some questions for you. They're going to type or they'll speak.
Okay, great. I'm sorry. I take care of my mother. I don't have children, but I take care of my mother. So she was telling me that something was, and I was like, it's better if I just go address it
That's
than
right.
say, hey, about 15,000 times in the background. Yes. So I'm sorry about that.
You're fine.
But what I was saying is, my father was given his Yoruba name in the early 70s by Baba Adefumi the First, right? And so Baba Adefumi the First actually became installed, and what that means is he became king of that village in South Carolina. And how do you become king? Well, of course, the people decide that you become a king. And he was recognized. He's deceased now, but he was recognized by other Yoruba kings from Nigeria as well. So he was initiated, first of all, the Cuban way. That's what we say, the Cuban way, in the Lukumi system in Cuba, to the same African deities, mind you. But remember, it's a creolization. So there are some slight differences, right? So he then went to Nigeria and also was initiated in another system, right? Same origin, but he was also got some initiations, my point is, in Nigeria as well. So he was able to forge those connections. So a lot of African Americans actually, if they are practicing Lukumi, if they're practicing Candomblé, if they're practicing even traditional Ifa worship from Nigeria, they really owe a debt of thanks to him and to Chris Oliano. Marjorie Quinones in New York was the first African-American woman initiated as a priestess in New York. I know this because, of course, I'm doing a documentary as well. So I get to talk to all of these people. But the funny thing is the world is big and the world is small. My mother, her first godmother, and the godmother is a person who's or godparent is someone who helps steer you, right, on the spiritual path. right? And that's really what it is in our religion as well. It's a little more complicated, but not really. They're
Yeah.
there to help steer you and to educate you on your spiritual path and journey. My mother's first godmother in the religion was Marjorie Quinones. I didn't know that until I started the documentary. Marjorie Quinones is the first African American woman to be initiated as a priestess to Orishas in the United States. Okay. Um, my father was initiated as a priest in the Lukumi system, which came out of Cuba, which is Afro-Cuban. That's Black Cuban. Okay. But my father was initiated in the Bronx in 1979. And when he passed away, he had been a priest of the deity or the Orisha Obatala for 36 years.
Wow.
And we didn't grow up, my brothers and I didn't have the luxury of growing up in New York or Miami, where there are lots of practitioners who look like me and look like you, Dr. Berry. We grew up in the Midwest. And so when we grew up, like in Cleveland, Ohio, and in Pittsburgh, a lot of times my family, it was us and maybe one other family, right? And other people might have been Latino, Afro Latinos and stuff that my parents kind of ran into over the years, because these people would look at us and they would see us with these necklaces on. So these necklaces are called ilekes. And these are like amulets that are consecrated, prayed over, and you actually go through a ritual to receive. These are consecrated amulets that are to protect me.
Wow.
Every time I leave my house. So I usually wear them. And when I'm on campus, there are some students on campus who are practitioners, or they know about them. And they're like, oh my God, I heard there was someone on campus who was a professor who was wearing ilekes. So in Yoruba, these are called ilekes. Okay. And if you go to Cuba, you'll see ilekes. They might call them necklaces in Spanish, which is collares. Okay. So people would see, my Latino brothers and sisters would see my collares, and immediately I got to be Afro-Cuban, right? Because at that time growing up, they didn't think Black Americans were practitioners. So they would walk up to me and my parents and immediately in Spanish. My parents don't speak Spanish at all. Exactly. My mama is from Pittsburgh and my daddy is from Cleveland. Okay. And they like, my parents are like show enough down revolutionaries, Afrocentric before it became a word or a phrase. So they would just, but they're Pan-Africanists. So they would always be, embrace them and say, no, 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 we from here. American? No way. And it was like, yes. And so even within Cleveland, our community really started to grow over the years with more and more people becoming curious. My parents themselves becoming godparents to many people. My father helped to initiate a lot of people into the priesthood. My mother as well. My mother is a priestess of Eshu. My father is a priest of Obatala. My brother is a Babalawo, who is another type of priest within our religion. My youngest brother is a priest of Ochosi. So it's just two of us who are not initiated as priests. We're practitioners, and we're proud practitioners. We just haven't been initiated as priests.
Gotcha.
And what that means is when you're initiated, it's much like joining the clergy anywhere, right? You should have a certain level of responsibility to the community and to yourself, right? And so when we talk about deities, each of these deities known as orishas do different things. Okay. So a lot of times, I don't know if you guys have seen this, where Beyonce will be wearing something gold or yellow, and she'll take a pretty picture, and people will say, "Oh, she channeling Oshun."
Right.
Oshun is the deity or Risha of love, of romance, of richness and sweetness of life. Okay. She is renowned for her beauty. Now, because she wore, Beyonce wore gold, and people read a book, an article, a blog, a Facebook post. Now they've made themselves out to be these experts on these deities, these orishas. So you oftentimes get them saying stuff like, oh, you know, she was channeling Oshun. And quite frankly, as a lifelong practitioner, I do find it a bit insulting. I understand, and I'm happy for us to, at any point, learn more about our traditional religions and cultures. But it's also like, it's not that simple.
But she may not have been.
Exactly. Because when I look at it, I'm also an artist and a filmmaker, right? So when I look at it, I'm like, actually, you know, that was a lot of European iconography, like the Madonna and the baby, the Black Madonna and Child, which is popular throughout Europe. I'm like, that's Catholic. I don't get where you're getting Oshun from that. I get the color scheme, okay, in some of her pictures, but that isn't definitive. Or most young women, when they become interested in this religion in particular, and they think they're pretty, all of them want to be a daughter of Oshun.
Okay.
Or they all want to be a priestess of Oshun.
Right.
And I'm like, this is so not based on what you look like. Okay. And so all the men, it's way more than that, because Oshun as a deity has different qualities. Yes, beauty is part of it, and wealth is another part of it. Right. But Oshun can take anything that's sweet and make it bitter if it sits too long.
Wow.
Right. And Oshun actually started out as a river goddess. There's the Oshun River.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Rather not, let me say this. Oshogbo is where her sacred shrine is in Nigeria. And it's on the river. She's a river deity as well. Okay. One of her animals, I hope I'm not saying it wrong, is a crocodile that represents her. Wow. Okay. And then when we talk about beauty and how even in Brazil and in Cuba, when artists do renderings of Oshun, we have to talk about and really examine what image they're putting out there, because white supremacy has infiltrated African spirituality like it has everything else in this world.
That's right. Professor Young, let's press pause right there. That's a good part, because that was a part of something that we had an assignment last week. And a lot of the students pulled that out to say, wait a minute, African ancestors had this religion, and a lot of things had been changed when they came to the Americas. And so I want to, so we don't hold you too long, I want to go to the class. And class, I know you guys may be on mute, or if you want to turn your cameras on. This is so rich, and I'm also recording this so we can watch this again. Any questions? Just something burning? Any questions that you may have for Professor Young? And I love how, like we said earlier, this is Intro to Religious Studies. In Chapter 1, we said that we may all have whatever religion that we serve or practice, should I say. But as we come to the study of it, we leave our minds open to receive and to learn. And we say, oh, that's interesting, but not through the lens of, oh, they do that and that's weird. No. It may be different. And so we're learning those differences and nuances tonight. So I'm going to be quiet. Any questions, comments from the class? No. That's so quiet. I see somebody coming. Hey, Irene.
Okay, I see. I'm in the chat section. So, yes. I'm scrolling down. In your religion, do you believe in one God? That's Latrina. We believe in one supreme God, and we believe in orishas as well, which are deities that God has ordained that help God. We believe God is the head, and we believe the orishas, the deities, are the hands. Okay, so that means that they do for. God asked them to do for. If you're familiar with Catholicism, they would be a little more, I would say, more of an elevated status than saints, but if you wanted to think of them as saints as well, you could. Just like saints, if you go to a traditional Catholic home, you will see a statue of the Virgin Mary, or you might see a statue of a particular saint, and you'll see the crucifix there. And sometimes they'll have a candle as well, you know, by that saint, or they might pray to that saint for certain things. So you could consider the Orishas angels as well. So if I had to say something, I would consider them as angels and saints in a combination, if you will. So our main holidays, Latrina, that's a good question. When you're in Cuba, sometimes like in places like Cuba and Brazil, like a saint's feast day might be equated with a particular deity. So let's say August 26th might be the feast saint day of Saint Barbara. On that day, they might in Cuba or Brazil say Happy Shango Day. You know what I'm saying? Because Saint Barbara is the saint that it's equated with in Catholicism. So they might do it that way. But as far as like traditional holidays, what we have is let me say this, like every year we have an Awan, Awan, for Baba Luaye. And Baba Luaye, that literally translates to Father of the World. Okay. Baba being father and Aye being earth. Okay. Or the world. So Baba Luaye, we have an Awan for Baba Luaye on December 17th every year. It's practiced generally around the mid to end part of December. And usually we go and we make an offering of animals, sometimes foods. We have a drumming ceremony. There's lots of singing, dancing, praising, and blessings. It's to help cleanse us. Like we leave all the bad stuff in the previous year so that we can receive our blessings and good health in the new year. So that happens on December 17th in most places that practice. And we also have days like where people were initiated, like the day you were initiated to the Orishas as a priest or priestess. You usually would that for 7 days you would put down like food for that deity. You would cook, and the thing is, and for our culture, and that's what we call it, our culture, our religion, like it's all about community as well. So we feed the community at the same time. At the Awan on December 17th, it's food. You're sent home with like a spiritual bath to take at night when you're at home. We send you home with plates of food. And when you come and like if someone say their Ocha birthday, that's their initiation birthday, right? We put down food or people bring food over to present to the deity. And at the end of the couple days after the celebration, we call everybody back, come get some of this fruit. It's been prayed over. It's been consecrated. You want to take this fruit or cake or whatever with you so that you can eat that holy food, that sanctified food, if you will.
You have a question from, all right, you guys keep it coming. Verna had a question.
Do you think the God is the same God that everyone else serves or just a different name? Thinking about the Tower of Babel. In my estimation, Verna, I believe it's the supreme being, it's the same God. I think that we all come from different walks of faith, but there are people who serve a good God and people who serve somebody else. That's the way I look at it. It's very black and white for me. Other people don't. So some people get offended. But literally, if you went to, I know a lot of people who are ethnically Yoruba, but spiritually they're Christian.
Yes.
But the term Edumare or Olodumare, Olorun, that's literally Yoruba for God, right, owner of heaven and earth.
Right.
So, you know, I know people who are Muslim, but are also initiated. Mm-hmm. I know people who are Christian, but are also initiated as well. Because for some people, it's not black and white. You know what I'm saying? It's the same. They all see it as the same. And I know a lot of people who are ethnically Yoruba. That's their ethnic group. And let something crazy happen to them, sickness, illness, the first thing they say is, I must go back to the village. My grandmother must give me some medicine. And it's
And you
usually that
guys
traditional
remember
medicine.
our video. Remember our video we watched last week. Professor Young talked exactly about that. It was wasn't it? It was the guy that was playing football, and he would have to go back because
He
he
talked
wasn't
to his
doing well, and he
ancestors.
would go. Say it again, Samuel.
He talked to his ancestors.
That's
Ancestors.
Yeah.
right.
And the foundation, I want to say this too, because I talked quite a bit about the deities, about the Orishas, and about God, um, our supreme God, Edumare. But I also want to say that in a lot of traditional religions, including my own, ancestor veneration is a huge part of it. That means we have to honor our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
We have to call their name. We believe that there is power in calling their name. And so if you come to my home, I always have a little altar set up in my home with pictures of my ancestors, my deceased relatives, my father. And I usually have a glass of water. I put fresh flowers there. And, you know, our kind of thing is, yes, we can go to God, the supreme God, but we believe that you always start with your ancestors first. Ask your ancestors to intercede on your behalf, to bless you with their wisdom, their knowledge, their love, to guide you, okay, if you will. And then from there, we go to Orishas, to the deities and stuff. For us, our angels are our guardian angels, and the only way I can truly liken it to, let's say, Christianity here in the States is like those, we believe our ancestors are our guardian angels.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
have to venerate and honor our ancestors.
And Professor Young, that, and we have another question from Latrina. You see a lot of that in Christianity. For example, okay, my dad passed, and you guys may probably, my dad is watching me from the bookshelf, and my dad and my uncle, I have their pictures are on the bookshelf. But you will often see that let's say after a person has passed away, and I'm talking from my lens in Christianity, that and I'll speak for me, my dad is watching over me, or if your mom passed, your mom is with you, your mom is watching you, your sister, your cousin, or whoever, your good friend, your best friend, or whatever, is watching you. So you guys see how we may be different, but we are a lot alike.
Yes.
Latrina had a question. Let's get to your question. Latrina had two questions. In Cuba, is there any racism against the African Cubans like here in the U.S.? And she had a question about
Yeah.
marriage.
My thing is white supremacy is pervasive
Hmm.
around the world. Cuba did not get, first of all, let me explain this to you. I don't believe Cuba and Brazil, they didn't get, okay, so we had our emancipation here in the United States was 1865. Cuba was like 1870 something, and Brazil wasn't until like 1888. Okay. So we were enslaved in those places too. And they still had a color caste system within people of color, with lighter skin. Those who looked more European in their phenotype were considered desirable, but they all still faced racism as a whole from white Cubans. So in Cuba, yeah, there's racism. It may not feel and taste exactly like American racism, but there's racism all the same, even within my religion, because you have people who are Cuban who practice the religion, and they'll meet someone who's African American like me who practices as well. I've had some people automatically assume I didn't know what I was talking about because I was African American. And
Wow.
I didn't grow up there. And it's the same thing. If I meet someone who is from Nigeria, and I've had Nigerian people who were ethnically Yoruba say, no one does that anymore. It is fetishism.
Wow.
I can't believe you would do that. And I'm like, I can't. Okay, well, I don't take it personally now. I don't care. I don't feel forced to argue. It doesn't bother me. We all have different walks of faith. And if this isn't your spiritual food, then please find the food that nourishes you. That's
Yeah.
the way I look at it. As far as arranged marriages, I mean, that's gone out of favor a long time ago, Latrina. In some places, I guess they do, but not in this. Like, we don't really do that.
Good. And you had two more questions. One from Latrina, do you practice witchcraft or healing? And then we're going to wrap up with Opal about tracing African religion back to Europe.
Okay. As far as witchcraft or healing, I personally, some people have embraced the term. I find the term witchcraft to be diminishing and derogatory, and usually belittling to people who practice traditional belief systems. Do we practice traditional healing with herbs and prayers and medicine? Yeah, we do. There's nothing wrong. We don't consider anything wrong with that. If you go to a herbalist and they say you need to take this herb, and that's what traditional medicine is. If you say, we don't go to the, if you don't, I go to a doctor like everybody else. So does the rest of most of the people I know. You know, would I prefer to cure it, with herbs? Yeah, I would. Like a lot of people, right? So if I go and I'm having an issue and the priest says you need to take this herb or you need to eat these specific foods, then I do that because that's a part of my healing. So I trust them as a traditional healer. I don't consider that to be witchcraft, because when I think of witches, I think of hocus pocus. I think of the witches of Eastwick. I think of something very European. And even then, that was European males trying to find a way to subjugate women who were midwives and herbalists. And so they made them to be negative.
And you guys remember from our reading last week that a lot of the African religious traditions were seen as dark or primitive or wrong, right? And you see me putting in my quotes, right? And because and one of our questions in that assignment was who, see my little quotes, said it was wrong. And here
Right.
we are in 2020 unraveling that things. And we're like, wait a minute, it wasn't wrong because that's what the ancestors did. All right.
Let
Go ahead.
me just share this with you. I'm an alien, or I've never heard of Christianity. I come to a ceremony. This is the body and blood of Christ. I will eat of it. I will drink of it. I want you to come up and take communion. This is the body and blood of Christ.
That's right.
I'm an alien. I don't know anything about your belief system.
That's right.
You told me that a man was dead and then he came back to life after 3 days and then disappeared.
Right.
Here's what I have to say to that. I, as an observer, and I don't believe this, so don't even run with it. They practice cannibalism and they think that people appear and disappear at will.
Yeah.
And they believe that Mary was impregnated by a spirit and had a baby.
Right. It could seem strange to someone.
It's strange, right? So it seems strange to someone who is not familiar with it.
On the outside.
On the outside. And if I were writing the book and I didn't like what I saw, then I say that everything you do is wrong and dark and primitive and evil. As one of my friends pointed out to me, who is more, I would say probably more agnostic than atheist, she said, well, all religions are made up. And I was like, yes, this is true. Because that's just me. I'm one of these people with logic, right? I leave logic at the door when it comes to our beliefs. And oftentimes we do that, right? Or we embrace them both at the same time, right? Because that's faith. Faith is believing. I don't necessarily have to see it necessarily, but I believe it. I believe it in my core, in my spirit. So it's one of those things. But I just wanted to say that I myself, Berna, I practice, I told you, I come from a Pan-African family. So what that means is like, I embrace wherever there are Africans everywhere, I am for the advancement of people of African descent, especially when we're fighting against oppression, and particularly white supremacy. So that's what that means for me, and that's what that has meant for my family. And I'm for the upliftment of people of African descent, and that we learn about ourselves and embrace ourselves around the world and embrace our beauty and our differences and our similarities. Myself personally, my father was initiated kind of in the Lukumi system coming out of Cuba from the Afro-Cubans. So I kind of lean more into that. And nowadays, like, you really don't see people hiding orishas or deities behind Catholic saints, especially in the United States. Maybe still in like places in Cuba and Puerto Rico, some places even in Brazil. But nowadays, most people are very open with it, and talk about it, like that type of thing. Girl, I am not an herbalist, Latrina. Girl, I cannot tell you what's good for high blood pressure.
You better call your doctor. Right?
That's what I'm like, girl. Get you some lisinopril or metoprolol. I don't know.
No, don't get stuff. Before we leave out, I'm not gonna hold you guys too long. Opal had a question on African religion. She said, "Speak on African religion traced back to Europe." And if you want to do this, you can type it in here. Professor Trevany wants to know a little bit more about how do we get in touch with our African roots if she wants to do some more research after this.
I would say this. I'll start with Trevany. Remember, our foundation really is with your ancestors and your ancestral lineage. The first thing is you need to find out more about your ancestors. So basically do a family tree. There are a lot of people in Atlanta who are practitioners, who are priests and what have you. There are places like Yeye's Botanica and different places that sell different, African implements, Yoruba implements and stuff like that. They usually have people there who can answer more of those questions, or even websites. If you really want to know, just get my email address from Professor Berry and I will answer that question for you. But start with your ancestors, know your lineage and everything, because that's the first thing people will tell you. You need to have an altar for your ancestors. You don't have to be initiated to a thing to do that. Those are your ancestors. So you need to research your lineage, make a small altar in your home for your ancestors. You know how sometimes on your big mama's birthday, you think about big mama and she passed away, you might go get her favorite cake, that coconut lemon cake, and cut a slice and leave it to the side for your ancestor. You already practice. That's the beautiful thing, is you all don't even know that we still have African cultural retentions within ourselves that we do on a daily. And
Professor Young.
Yes, ma'am.
Libation.
Yes, ma'am. Pour out a little liquor for my homies.
That's African, y'all.
That's nothing but African. That's a libation for all my dead homies. If you ever poured something out for all my dead homies, that was African. That was for your ancestors. That was for all of those who passed before you. And what are you doing? You're paying homage to them. That is African all day, every day. Okay?
We didn't even know it.
Didn't even know it. That's that African retention. It's already there. It's in your DNA. Okay?
And I'm sorry, yoga. Well, everybody can practice some yoga, Trevany. I need to practice it myself. Thank you, Opal. Everybody, thank you so much. This was awesome. We're going to give you, I know we're not verbally, everybody can't speak right now, but if you could type a little chat in there, we say thank you so much, Professor Young.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Young.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
This was great.
Thank you, Professor Young.
You all are very welcome. You have my email address. You are welcome to email me if you have other questions. This was just an overview, but I'm always available to answer questions. And if I don't know, I do not have a problem telling you I don't know, and here's where you should look. Okay?
That's a quick question.
With your articles. Go ahead, Irene.
You mentioned that you did documentaries. Any of your documentaries on this subject?
Yes, it's called American Africans. There's an excerpt out that I did years ago for a fundraising, but I'm gonna finish it. I promise you. And when I finish it, Dr. Barry will know all about it. Um, and I will let you all know. If you want information here, I'm gonna type in my website. So if you guys want more
Yes,
information or to
please.
keep in touch with me, you can do so through my website as well.
Okay.
And I'm putting that in right here.
I can listen to this all day long.
Oh,
Do you have like church we can come to?
We don't do we don't really, the church every week thing is not a thing that we normally do, but we do have ceremonies. Some are open to the public, some aren't. When I see something that's open that I think you all should come to, I will definitely let Professor Barry know, especially now with Corona, we're really not doing it. But some ceremonies are closed and only really for the community, and some things are a little more open. So when there's something open that I think might be worthwhile, I will definitely let Professor Barry know. And I had the opportunity. I don't know everything. We're all still learning. And I grew up in my tradition, right? I'm African American, but I kind of grew up in this Afro-Cuban tradition, and I know a lot of people and all of this stuff, right? But I last year got the chance to go to a Trinidadian ceremony. Off the hook. It was amazing. There were so many similarities and yet differences. They practiced Christianity. They had a church service first, and then they said it's time for a switch, and they had a Yoruba ceremony right afterward.
wow.
It was so incredible. And for them, again, they looking at you like, what? It's all this, it goes the same place. And this is what we have to do. That's what they say. This is what we must do.
Must do.
Yeah.
Professor Young, you are so awesome.
Thank you. This was really fun. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. You're a busy lady. And she's teaching classes herself this summer as well. And I just appreciate you. So if I give you a big virtual hug.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you to my class as well. You guys hung in there. Thank you so much. And you guys continue to have a good week. We won't meet anymore this week, of course. And I'll post, I think we'll probably meet next Thursday. So it'll be a little over a week before I see you. Okay, guys?
All right.
All right.
All right.
Tiffany, thank you for being our guest.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
This is fun. I learned a lot.
Have a good one.
And
Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.